D-Day. The Allied armies landed in occupied France. For the first time in 4 years of conflict, the nation felt optimistic, praying that this was the beginning of the end of the Nazi regime, the end of Adolf Hitler. But Hitler himself was miles from the fighting, tucked away in the mountains of southeast Germany in a boat hole called the Berghof. This was his holiday retreat before the war and his favored military headquarters since. At the Berghof, Hitler thought he was safe, untouchable, but Hitler was wrong. Within a few days, he would become the target of Operation Foxley. Operation Foxley was an assassination plan that could have ended the war early and saved millions of lives. It could have changed the course of history. This is the story of that plan. My plan to kill Hitler. During the war, I went by the codename LBX. I was a staff officer in the Special Operations Executive, the SOE, created for so-called irregular warfare, and officially it didn't exist. I worked for X Section, briefed for action in Germany, but I never saw action. My war was fought behind a desk, one of the backroom boys.
It was a secret army. And it was quite an army too. I think globally, we had 1 million operatives globally. The manifesto was to train men and women to be an agent in irregular warfare for possible operations overseas. It was a broad canvas, and the jigsaws were never revealed to people, but that was the broad canvas.
The corridors of SOE were buzzing with rumor. An intelligence report had come in from our office in Algiers claiming Hitler was in a French chateau near Perpignan which could be bombed. The chiefs of staff were asked for their approval. Churchill was asked to give his authority. The go-ahead was given. But Hitler wasn't in France. He was safe in the Berghof. Yet now the question was being asked, should SOE have a definite plan to kill Hitler? A memo went out calling a Security Council meeting with the senior players in SOE. Oh, and Rachel Cathcart, a junior officer from the Secret Intelligence Service, SIS, who liked to think she was one step ahead of the game. Staff officers were not invited.
Miss Cathcart. What's happening?
Did you read the memo?
What memo? Of course I've read the memo.
Well, as we, most of us anticipated, the plan to kill Hitler while on holiday in France turned out to be utter nonsense. However,
the general was one of the people who wrote the rules of SOE, a champion of irregular warfare.
The important thing is that the authority to do it was granted. Because of that, the time has definitely come for the liquidation of Hitler to be given some priority.
I believe Hitler's military strategy is proving so disastrous. If he were assassinated, then, in my opinion, the German conduct of the war would improve considerably.
The Foreign Secretary said that, in his opinion, Hitler's removal would shorten the war considerably.
I agree with that. As long as Hitler is there, the war will continue.
But surely it's better to keep him there until Germany follows him to certain defeat.
Colonel Thornley was my immediate boss and sceptical about assassination.
Germany is already at the point of certain defeat, and it can only be hastened if Hitler is done away with.
Vice-Marshal Ritchie was cut from the same cloth as Gubbins.
The fact is that Hitler's assassination has been dealt with on a very ad hoc basis. Now, I'm not suggesting that we decide today whether he should or should not be killed, but I would like us to decide on forming a group that can study all available intelligence and come up with a workable plan. So, for that to be achieved, I would like Thornley and an officer from X section to start work immediately. I will also talk to C about a representative from SIS, providing them assistance. That way, all interests can be protected, and the planning of Operation Foxley may proceed.
What happened?
I'm still waiting.
Once an idea was approved, a staff officer was commissioned to come up with a blueprint. I was the one who was asked, "How do you kill Hitler?" Coming up with any plan is like a jigsaw, and despite its magnitude, this was no different. Start at the edges and work towards the center to build up the picture. How many ways are there to kill a man? How many ways to assassinate a leader? Hitler. The key thing was not to get overawed. Just begin the jigsaw.
I'm fascinated by Operation Foxley because this is an operation of such magnitude, the assassination of Adolf Hitler. It's incredible, it's breathtaking.
But was assassination part of their remit in general terms?
One of the documents says assassination is in our portfolio of activities, along with terrorism, along with subversion and so on. Certainly assassination is considered, it's thought about, and not too many moral scruples being expressed in the documents that I've seen.
There were people whom we did want to get rid of. There were various people whom we'd be quite happy to do away with. And you're involved in this, you haven't time to wonder whether it's gentlemanly or ungentlemanly. You haven't got time. You have an objective to attain, and you go for it, whatever it might be.
I think, personally, that it seems to me that Churchill is happy with the idea of assassination in a way that others are not. And he is, of course, the man who set up SOE. It's his, well, perhaps not his brainchild, but certainly he is a major impetus behind it. I think Churchill is in on this whole culture, if you like, that assassination is the thing to do.
You can't plan a military operation without up-to-date intelligence, and that was stored inside the Secret Intelligence Service, SIS. So you called in the favors and asked some questions. The problem was that SIS had its own agenda. So he's still not back? No. Fine. Thanks. Bye. And it was up to them if they wanted to give you the answers.
I'm right in saying that the SOE was created for the war, whereas SIS, the Secret Intelligence Service, or MI6, was something that had been going for a long time, and there was a certain amount of head-to-head and rivalry between the two.
Yes, they're basically seeking to do two jobs, and two jobs that are frequently incompatible. SOE, in fact, grew out of an offshoot of the Secret Intelligence Service. But because SOE was all about loud bangs, it was all about trying to damage the infrastructure of the German war effort, whereas SIS tended to like to operate in quiet, in peace, you won't even know I'm here. There was frequent clashes.
To try and resolve these tensions, the men at the top would meet. As head of SOE, General Gubbins had his match in the head of SIS, Brigadier Sir Stuart Menzies, known as C.
The truth is that we at SIS walk in soft shoes. You at SOE walk in spats. You like loud music. We like silence.
Your silence can be particularly deadly.
So can your music.
One of the operations that caused the tension was the assassination in 1942 of Nazi Chief of Security, Lieutenant General Heydrich. Heydrich was one of the twisted brains behind the final solution. 2 Czech assassins were trained by the SOE in Britain, then spirited back into Prague with the means to make a bomb. They threw the bomb at Heydrich's car. Heydrich died. But the consequences were savage. The assassins were killed, and then 5,000 blameless Czech villagers were slaughtered. Nonetheless, the assassination had been the right thing to do. It was a job well done.
It was a big cost, an enormous cost, but I still think that the assassination itself was perhaps more important because it brought to an end a certain aspect of German attitudes to this whole conflict. Killer Heydrich was well rid of.
But Heydrich's assassination had thrown the difference between SOE and SIS methods right into the spotlight.
Which is precisely why I would prefer it if you cooperated, at least at the planning stage. I'm even suggesting that we use one of your people on this. And I know at the end of the day it won't be me that they'll be reporting to.
You think my boys are deliberately obstructing this banshee that you have named Foxley?
It had crossed my mind.
There's a thin line between obstruction by design and obstruction by default.
The same effect. We can't just get on with the job, can we?
In French, dusk translates as the time between the dog and the wolf.
That's so. My French is a little rusty, and I do seem to have other things on my mind.
Would it be correct to say that Nazi Germany is at present at dusk, in which case do we fear the wolf that follows?
Oh, God. Don't be so bloody obtuse.
Or is it dawn, when the wolf sleeps and the dog wakes, loyal, obedient and controlled?
It's just a bloody nightmare that we want to end.
Then we must tame the wolf.
Then I shall put a bullet between the wolf's eyes. That should do.
Then I will be plain. If Hitler is assassinated, if he goes, who comes next? Will it be Himmler, Speer, Goebbels, another Nazi, who is willing to make a peace deal in order to keep Nazi Germany going? Or Stalin? I'm buggered if I want a communist for a neighbor. Or the Americans awaiting their turn to take over.
Would you care to know what I think will happen if Hitler goes?
Of course.
The war will end. There will be peace. Oh, and I should mention, as you know, that in all of this I do carry the authority of our mutual friend. I spoke to C yesterday on Foxley. I cannot say he was exactly optimistic or enthusiastic.
But he said he would help as much as he could in providing information about Hitler's movements. So please arrange for LBX to be put in touch with whomever C selects.
Good morning, sir. I thought you might need some intelligence.
So you've come to spy on me, Miss Cathcart.
The past informs the future, and the failure of someone else's plan could lead to the success of ours.
Maurice Bavot.
Maurice Bavot was a Swiss theology student who watched the rise of Hitler's criminal regime with disgust. In 1938, he went to the Berghof with the intention of shooting Hitler at close range. Despite saying he was a loyal supporter, he was unable to get close enough. But a guard suggested he should go to Munich to try and meet Hitler there. So Bavot went to a public parade where, posing as a journalist, he secured a seat in the front row with a revolver in his pocket. Hitler appeared and Bavot reached for his gun. But as Hitler passed,
his line of sight was obscured by the raised arms of a Nazi salute.
Poetic injustice.
Georg Elser.
In 1939, Georg Elser, a German cabinet maker with communist sympathies, managed to sneak into a Munich beer hall and plant a homemade bomb behind the podium from which Hitler was due to speak. He set the timer for 3 days later at 9:20 p.m. Hitler came and spoke, but for no particular reason cut his speech short. The bomb went off at 9:20. Hitler had left at 9:07.
He missed Hitler by 13 minutes.
Close.
Was Hitler seen as an easy target, do you think, Klaus?
The mere fact that Elsa should have been allowed to spend several nights before the speech in that particular public house, the Berghof, to carve out a niche for this infernal machine is indication enough that at the time the security apparatus around Hitler were either lax or incompetent, depending on the interpretation.
Das war wirklich alles so natürlich lasch, also überhaupt nicht streng. Aber auch die Reichskanzlei, die neue Reichskanzlei, wenn ich zum Dienst gegangen bin oder von draußen rein, die ganzen 400 Meter durch die ganze Reichskanzlei war keine Bewachung, kein Posten, nichts, gar nichts. Sie konnte auch da reingehen, durch die ganze Halle durch, bis ins Speiseraum, rein in die alte Reichskanzlei, wo die Wohnung war. Keine Posten da, keine Bewachung, nichts, gar nichts.
You seem to have missed something. May I?
It's not strictly a technical word, though I concede he must think he's got a charmed life.
Oh, he does. And more. In a report by the Americans, he claims to be infallible and invincible. He believes he's on a divine mission. In the beginning was the Word. I thought that was Jesus.
So we've got to eliminate those factors. We've got to find out when Hitler's at his most vulnerable, how we can get close to him, and what method we can use to kill him. In other words, his luck runs out.
Do you think that Hitler thought of himself as being invincible and immortal and therefore discouraged any wider sort of security?
Not quite. I would put it down to the fact that he was curiously trusting in a way you wouldn't expect of a dictator like that.
Ja, einmal nachts ein Luftangriff war auf Berlin. Da ist Hitler dann in den Garten gegangen und hat sich das Spiel der Scheinwerfer angesehen. Nicht? Und dann wurde aber flak geschossen. Und ein Kamerad von uns, der sagte, mein Führer, gehen Sie doch bitte stellen Sie unter das Dach, wenn es wird flak geschossen und da können Splitter runterkommen. Da hat Hitler geantwortet, naja, mir wird schon nichts passieren. Hat sich nicht unter das Dach gestellt. Er meinte, seine Leute, also wir, er war damit sehr einverstanden, die Leute machen das alles recht gut. Damit bin ich sehr, sehr zufrieden. Er wollte nee, das stimmt, also Hitler wollte keine große Bewachung haben oder sowas. Das hat ihn gestört.
I was like a detective, but I wasn't looking for clues to solve a murder, rather to commit one. At that time, scraps of intelligence were coming in from all over occupied Europe, to be snatched up by our agents and delivered to our files. All we had to do was make sense of them. So, what are the options? 1, when he's at the Berghof. 2, in transit on his train. 3, in a public appearance. 4, up close in a personal meeting. So to begin with the Berghof, we need aerial photos of the whole area. We need to talk to anyone who can have involved.
Someone in the Wehrmacht seems to be trying to do your job.
He likes apple juice. He likes apple juice, has a weak stomach.
Do we know who did it?
Can't take spicy food and takes milk with his tea. Not us. All we know is a German colonel met Hitler. There was a bomb in his briefcase.
Colonel von Stauffenberg was one of a group of senior blue-blooded soldiers who conspired to assassinate Hitler in the Wolf's Lair, Hitler's HQ deep in the forests of East Prussia. Stauffenberg met Hitler with his bomb, manufactured from SOE material. He placed it under the table where Hitler was leaning. Stauffenberg said he'd forgotten something and left the room. The bomb exploded as Stauffenberg drove triumphantly away.
Yes? Yes.
Hello? Thank you. He's alive. Injured but not dead. He said, I'm immortal.
Hitler survived, with minor injuries to his arm. Stauffenberg was arrested and executed that night.
We should carry on where we were headed. This makes little difference. We can work around it.
Yes, it does, sir. Whatever's left of the German resistance after this will want no involvement in anything we plan. Security will be intensified tenfold. Thank you. Everyone's going to be even more paranoid. No one's going to be able to get close to him. Let's go to a meeting.
About this?
No, it's nothing.
It has to be said, however, that after that, security was tightened up severely, and that in due course it would have been much more difficult for a foreign hitman to get a chance, for the simple reason that the number of public appearances decreased dramatically, to the point where he had 1 or 2 a year. And these indeed would have been the best chance would have represented the best chance for a foreign hitman, unless he had someone on the inside feeding him up-to-date intelligence.
The security was very tight, I must say. And it was not easy to have access to Hitler. There was the interior circle, I think, was 24. And then there were second circle and third circle. And it was nearly impossible to come near to Hitler, except for those who belonged to his entourage.
The German resistance was ripped apart, so ending any hope of an inside job. But the Allies were taking thousands of prisoners from both fronts, and any one of them could be trained as a potential assassin.
They came over to this country, they came through the immigration, and they were examined there. Their whole life was gone into there, what had happened to them while they were here. And those who were able, mentally and physically, and who were determined to avenge all that had happened, they'd be chosen for pre-selection in the preliminary courses down around the home counties, be carefully vetted there, and if anything was found against them, to be turned out.
I was drawn to the interrogation file of a Polish-born POW, reported as being particularly keen to work for the Allied cause.
I told you.
Tell us again.
What do you wanted to test me? I grew up on German side of Poland, so I am fluent in German.
And you were picked up in Normandy on the front line?
No, second row. They would not put me on the front line.
Because they thought you would surrender?
Because they knew I would surrender. And I did. It's just a pity you took so long to get there.
But they trusted you enough to give you a rifle?
They did not have to trust. They could have killed me so easily.
And, of course, you said you made a choice to fight for them in 1939.
If Nazi army invade your country, come to your village, put the gun to your head, threaten to kill all women and children, and say you have choice, fight with us or die. Is this choice?
Was it not more honorable to die?
Dead men cannot revenge.
And that's why you want to fight with us?
You give me a bomb and war will be finished.
Seeking solution to what they regarded as destruction of home and land. Not so much revenge as seeking a resurrection of their family, if they still lived, and of their country. Because country is very important when you're fighting a war.
Future agents were sent to special training schools and instructed in the skills of irregular warfare, unarmed combat, disguise, terrorism, subversion, everything to be prepared for the unknown mission. Arguably SOE's most successful missions involved derailing trains. In 1942, a team of Polish saboteurs had orders to derail a fast train. Charges were laid and the resulting explosion killed 430 Germans. It was an amazing triumph. By now we had gathered a lot of intelligence about the Führerzug, a special train that Hitler used to travel with in Germany. Its appearance, its security, and its routes. We even knew that it was cleaned by French women POWs. The Führerzug is described nowadays as a dirty violet or a very dark blue. The speed of the Führerzug varies from 90 to 120 kilometers per hour. Germany not only is the track itself relatively free from military police, but neither bridges nor tunnels are heavily guarded. So we had intelligence about Hitler's train, and we had experience of train sabotage. It made perfect sense to plan to assassinate Hitler as he traveled. Also, it was time for me to stop asking questions and start coming up with something concrete. The German lines had at last been smashed in Normandy, and the path to Paris was opened up. The Red Army was advancing to Warsaw. The Nazi war machine was wobbling. Perhaps Operation Foxley could push it over the edge.
Bombing the train. It's the best option.
We know that Hitler regularly travels from Berlin to the nearest station to the Berghof, which is in Salzburg. We know that the train control is warned 3 to 4 hours ahead and the station 20 minutes ahead.
We don't have access to that kind of information.
What? Tap into the loose talk in the cafes, the French women who watch the trains.
Tap into the French women?
Yes. I'm sure they can be dated. I'm sure they can be chatted up.
So, a sabotage party, disguised as station police, should easily be able to lay charges and destroy the train as it goes into a tunnel.
How do we even know if he's on the train? As you said... Could you stop that, please? As you said, the stations aren't warned until literally minutes before. And even if we did have people on the ground, which we don't, it would be too late. The timetables aren't transmitted in codes that we can break in time. We have no agents in that area, and the German resistance is now an unknown quantity. And most importantly, there's one thing we can be certain of. It's that Hitler is unpredictable. He changes his mind at the last minute and follows no routine.
Then we move to plan B.
Which is?
Someone could wait at a station with a suitcase filled with explosives and throw it under the wheels of the train as it passed. Though the operative would have to be prepared to face consequences.
These are real people, sir.
I'm sure we can find someone among the Austrian and German POWs with a sufficiently strong hatred of Hitler.
That they'd be prepared to risk certain death.
Yes.
That would jeopardize all the contacts we've made so far.
So?
The contacts we've made today help determine the reconstruction of Germany after the war.
This isn't about that.
This is about
It's about finishing the war.
It's about finishing the war properly.
Is this you talking?
What do you mean?
I think perhaps this is something you forgot to mention. I refer to a Foreign Office memo released a few days ago, and I quote, "It can now be said with some definiteness that we are better off with things as they are today than if the plot of 20th of July had succeeded and Hitler had been assassinated." That was why you had to rush off for that meeting that day, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't.
Wasn't it? Miss Cathcart, please answer the following yes or no. As an intelligence officer, you have been asked to provide us with information.
Yes, sir.
As an intelligence officer, you work not for the SOE but the SIS.
Yes, sir.
Is that a conflict of interest?
There should be none, sir.
Have you been told to pull in the reins on this operation since the Stauffenberg bomb?
You are devising a plan that needs to be thorough, sir. There are greater strategic considerations that should inform your planning, and I'm here to ensure that you're aware of these things. If the plan is inadequate, there's more at stake than just this operation.
Thank you, Miss Cathcart. Sandra, please add. The information available regarding the Führerzug and its movements is nothing like complete or precise. A final check-up on the spot by the operatives or the leader is stressed.
We have a staff officer who hears about various things going on within the organisation, and he's just gone through this. Well, maybe we could do this. Oh, I read about that once. Perhaps we can do this. I mean, the idea of an agent standing on a platform with a bomb that he either has to have already set going or he has to initiate at some point as a train is rattling through goodness knows how many kilometres an hour, and either manages to throw it so that it derails the train or detonates underneath Hitler's carriage. I mean, he's absolutely crackers.
Progress reports were submitted to my boss, Thornley, and rumour was that he was not impressed. But there is a huge gap between planning and actual operation. The train plans were not the plans, just one possibility for action. There were other options for assassinating Hitler, and I would find one.
The best thing about this is there's no known antidote. Absolutely none. Take it and you're dead, completely dead. We've used anthrax, cyanide, botulinum, even a few without common names. They're all available, all tried and tested. But this beauty's little genius is taken in a sufficiently lethal dose. It's tasteless and odourless, and neither hard nor soft water is visibly affected.
Black coffee?
Ah, watch. Nothing.
Tea. Goblet with milk. He always has milk with his tea.
Anyone I know?
Unlikely.
You never know.
Poison could be the best option. Hitler's food was supplied by home farms where everything was monitored and tasted. But on his train, water was taken on at stations without being checked. There was a flaw in his security. Interference with the drinking and cooking water is the only clandestine means which offers itself. It might be possible for an operative to introduce the medium at night into the water tank in the form of a strong solution, which the jolting of the train would distribute evenly in the water.
The water one is an interesting one because it can only be done from someone on the inside.
Yeah.
And that in itself creates all sorts of problems trying to infiltrate his sort of close protection team, etc., which I think is pretty impossible, really, unless you're going to poison the water away from, you know where the source is coming from. Again, a lot of detailed research, a lot of time spent on the ground, and could they afford to have someone just looking at poisoning the water, having them on the ground for 6 months?
The plan to poison Hitler was too ambitious, maybe impossible. I would have to find another alternative. In the west, the Allies were now approaching Paris. In the east, the Russians were liberating town after town. German defeat looked inevitable, and the more it looked like victory would be won on the battlefield, the less anyone was interested in assassination. SIS were especially fearful of what would happen in Germany if Hitler was killed. They wanted unconditional surrender, and Hitler being killed at this time might threaten that. As a result, the whole future of Operation Foxley was in question. I suppose you heard what Churchill said about assassination attempts. Decisive as they may be one of these days, it is not in them that we should place our trust, but in our own strong arms and the justice of our cause. Them. He's talking about us. An assassination attempt.
It's just to boost morale.
It hardly helps with ours. I hear there's a certain amount of skepticism about the plans that I'm suggesting. You don't have to answer.
I think we should look into the possibility of using a sniper.
Yes.
You know, there's a rumour that in 1938 the British attaché in Berlin suggested that.
Why wasn't it taken up?
You can't just kill someone because of what they might do in the future. Assassination's hard to justify when you're not at war. It's generally called murder.
We've been at war for 4 years and this prevarication is beginning to feel like murder to me. You know, 5 years ago, if someone said to me, I've lost someone I love, I'd have said, oh my God, I'm sorry. Now it's just me too. Every single person I know has lost someone.
That's why I agree we should get rid of Hitler. But we should also get rid of Nazism for good.
Yes.
So we really are saying the same thing.
We are. We are in agreement. And I'll find us a sniper. Hello?
Right. I've sent you a list of first-class marksmen. There's a chap you may be interested in, just back from the front. He's military-trained, an infantryman. Now he's a sniping instructor in one of our special training schools.
Cite Sergeant Langley. Sniping is not the vague, haphazard shooting of the unknown. But the shooting of a man should be no different than shooting a target. You keep in your mind only two things: getting the job done and escaping unscathed.
What about the profile of a sniper, David?
Physical characteristics require him to be, in terms of a military sniper, a first-class infantryman. He's got to be able to read a map, got to be able to read ground, know how to move across ground in the best way without being seen. He's got to be capable of camouflaging himself, concealing himself, and to the point where he can put himself in the best position to take a shot. The mental side, of course, probably the compartmentalization ability to isolate himself from almost human feelings when he's engaging a target, which, because of the telescopic sights, he can clearly see is a human being, and very often will be doing something that's quite non-military. He may be standing in a meal queue, he may be going to the lavatory, and that therefore requires a type of person who can really almost be cold-blooded enough to ignore the fact that it's a person who's doing a perfectly normal human thing, during the course of which he gets shot.
Aim for the upper stomach. Or some prefer the brain shot. We stop all our movement. We clear our mind until all we hear is breathing.
There were several options where a sniper could take a shot. In Berlin, but there we knew the security was maximum. At a public appearance, but we knew these were less frequent. Or at the Berghof. The Berghof lies in an amphitheatre of the Bavarian Alps, adjacent to the former Austrian frontier. The greater part of the area is hilly and densely wooded, and should therefore provide for good cover, even in winter.
Einfach zum Berghof. Hier ist der Berghof, Hitlers Sommersitz. Ja. Hier ist die Wohnung Hitler. Arbeitszimmer und auf der anderen Seite Schlafzimmer. Ja, war sehr schön, ja. Ganz schön. Hier eine Idylle im Berghof. Das ist hier privat, so keine Regierung. Das ist Hitler ganz privat, nicht in seinem Haus.
We knew the Berghof was a place of beauty, and that made it even more grotesque that so much evil was plotted there. Hitler had been going there since the 30s, and since then he'd cocooned himself with his inner circle on and off throughout the war. A lot of information about the Berghof had already been collated, but I spread the word that I needed something new. It was Rachel and the SIS who would provide the breakthrough.
He's been told you're an intelligence officer. He was part of Hitler's own personal guard detail, but fell out of favour due to a fondness of schnapps. We've even got a photograph of them together.
We can tell who it is from the back of his head. It was incredible. We'd got our hands on a POW who'd actually been part of the VAC company, Hitler's personal guard detail. My challenge was to trick him into a sense of security, play him with what I already knew to see if he'd give me something I didn't.
Looks like a good place to be posted.
It's a view from the terrace. My God, I swear. You can stand there and feel glorified. Nothing compares. All around thick forest, pine. Some areas like around the Teehaus seem like they are always in the nighttime.
Snow falls fairly early because of altitude, sometimes as early as September.
It must have made security impossible with the forest so thick.
The hills were much worse. Running up and down all the time.
But you'd have got all these buildings, Hitler's residence, houses for Bormann, Göring, the domestic staff, SS barracks presumably, and not to mention the tea houses and the hotel.
There was no hotel.
I'm sorry, I thought there was a hotel. I have most of the buildings listed, but could you?
This was a hotel. Now it is a hospital. They bring the wounded Gebirgsjäger from Norway and such places and put them in there.
Troops returning from Norway are posted to units around the Berghof.
This is me.
Really?
We're all so proud. All the guards were. We were the closest bodyguards to Hitler. We were right on his doorstep.
Security personnel, taken care of by the RSD. These are the military police. The RSD patrol are usually accompanied by dogs. Passes are dark blue and all require a stamp. Civilian pickets. These civilian sentry posts guard the outer areas and the roads. They look like ordinary workmen and are a very mixed type, but reliable Nazis of high standing. SS Führer Begleitet Commando formed the inner circle of protection.
It must have been a nightmare. Not knowing when he was going to come, when he was going to leave, what he was going to do when he was there.
He might not do as planned or as predicted. He changes his mind and he changes his plans. But when Hitler is at the Berghof, he always goes for his morning walk to the Mooslahnerkopf Teehaus.
What do you mean, his morning walk?
He always sticks to the same routine. Rises 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock. Goes to see his barber. Then he goes for his morning walk. It's always downhill, 15 to 20 minutes. This is his time. There's SS guard,
At each end of the walk, an SS man patrolling the route. But Hitler, he cannot bear to feel himself being watched. At the Berghof, he feels 100% safe. He even flies a swastika when he is there, which you can see from a cafe in the town. This is his world. His house, his world.
He's got a routine. He's got a bloody routine, okay? So here 9 o'clock, here 10 o'clock to the barber's for that daft moustache, and then off for his 20-minute walk to the Teehaus. And there's no guards, he doesn't allow them. So, the path can be seen in the main from this sentry here, and only in part by this sentry here. From here to here, there's no one. He's on his own.
Ja, wenn Hitler unterwegs war zum Teehaus, da sind wir so 70 Meter etwa hinterhergegangen, aber da wurde nicht gefragt, ob man bewaffnet ist oder nicht. Man könnte hingehen als Person, aber unbewaffnet. Aber zur Uniform gehörte nun mal eine Waffe am Koppel. Das gehörte zur Kleidung, aber das würde nicht unbedingt sein müssen.
How do we know he's there?
Your Wach company bloke is emphatic about the existence of a swastika flag that flies every time he's at the Berghof. And it can be seen from a cafe in the town.
Auf dieser Seite ist das Hitlers Haus, der Berghof. Und der Hitler ist dann hier so lang gegangen, hier durch das Freigelände. Und hier war das Teehaus. Das ist Teehaus. Das war hier Freigelände. Man hätte von da, hätte man vielleicht Hitler umbringen können. Von der Entfernung. Hier war die Möglichkeit, wo das Gelände frei war.
Hitler is so complacent, he thinks that he's invulnerable in his own home, and that is his only true place of vulnerability. We've got him. Now I really was racing against time. Paris was liberated, the Eastern Front was cracked. But every victory was a defeat for my plan going operational. Those saying it was better to leave Hitler in charge, where he could mess up, were becoming more vocal. And my boss Thornley took it upon himself to try and skewer my plan. When did you write this?
Yesterday.
Who's got it?
Everyone.
As a strategist, Hitler has been of the greatest possible assistance to the British war effort.
Although the military situation has been temporarily stabilized on the Western Front, it must be remembered that the military power of Germany has not yet been decisively defeated. To remove Hitler would almost inevitably canalize him and give birth to the myth that Germany would have been saved if he had lived.
It would be disastrous if the world came to think that the Allies had to resort to these low methods, as they were otherwise unable to defeat the German military machine.
It would not be in the interests of the Allied cause for the SOE to attempt the assassination of Hitler.
Do you agree with this?
Yes, I do, sir.
For the first time, I have a plan that is becoming technically sound, and he's banging on about the same damn things he banged on about 3 months ago.
You asked to come up with a plan. That is all. That is all you were ever meant to do.
Yes, but it's meant to be an operation, and until it is, then, in fact, in my eyes, actually, I have failed.
But with respect, sir, there are holes in it.
I beg your pardon?
Well, for example, and please allow me to say these things, you have a plan for once the operatives are at the Berghof. But there's been no real consideration about how to get them in, or come to that, how to get them out.
Infiltration and exfiltration will be considered once the plan becomes operational.
The most important thing is that we don't lose sight of the whole picture.
I have not lost sight of my responsibilities.
Nor have I, if that's what you're implying.
I know you haven't.
Excuse me, sir.
You think this is about my ego? My God, you think this is about me? There is a plan that I believe will end all this slaughter. A plan that will work and that any soldier would be willing to execute no matter what the risk. I don't care whose plan it is, I just care that it works and it happens.
But that is not our decision.
Suddenly everyone had an opinion. Thornley's memo had stirred up a hornet's nest. On one side, those like my ally Ritchie were saying to kill him, and on the other, those like Miss Holmes were saying leave him to rot. And no one could agree.
In reference to Thornley's memo, these are not low methods, and any means to destroy such a pernicious and base command should be taken.
Hitler should be permitted to live until he dies of senile decay before the eyes of the people he has misled. Rob him of his halo. Make him a laughingstock.
As long as Hitler remains alive, he will retain the outward loyalty of the majority of the generals and general staff. Remove Hitler, and there's nothing left.
This is absolutely wrong. If his murder is traced back to the Allies, he will become the greatest martyr of all times.
The planning should continue.
Was it, in general terms, a good idea to assassinate Hitler? I mean, there is an argument that he was making such a holics of the war by that stage, it's better to let him go on doing it. I mean, what do you think?
You could take a cynical view, of course, and say that, yes, he's making a balls up of the German war effort. There's that. So by all means, let's keep him at the helm. By the same token, you'll have to choose this course fully knowing that the war is not over yet, that it might take yet another 5 or who knows, 15 months, and that you are essentially accepting that both you and your allies will still suffer tens or even hundreds of thousands of dead in order to bring about this highly desirable result. If, on the other hand, your attitude is to get this over and done with as soon as possible, then of course you do it. If, of course, big if, you get a chance at a clean shot, because you have to be aware of the fact that there's not going to be a second chance.
Even if he's killed successfully, is that a guarantee that the war ends?
Well, yes, probably not straight away, probably not for another couple of months, but yes, it would.
I wasn't part of the political debate. That was not my job. And now I was asked to submit a final report. It was clear to me that the sniper option was the best option, so this was the moment to ensure my plan was sound. Approached by the Larisbach River. Through the woods. To the wire fence.
Is there any option of coming in from, let's say, the arc west through to north?
Yeah, it would have to be in this area.
So there's a major valley to cross, isn't there?
Yeah,
with the river. So this seems to me on this map to be a relatively uninhabited area.
Yeah.
And I think we want to come in, if we can, from this direction.
I would imagine you're not going to be encountering too much of the population coming across.
The operatives should be in position not earlier than 1,000 hours to give the dog patrol time to pass.
I think the dogs are the biggest problem. Because a dog does not miss anything.
No.
If a man was to be in a location where he was having to go in to do a snipe, he would have to disguise his own human smell and his own body odours, etc. And I would suggest that he would use something like local animal manure, stuff like this. He'd cover himself just to try, because it's the scent that the dog will pick up on. But it's not a foregone conclusion that they won't find you.
Mauser's sniper's rifle. Explosive bullets in the magazine. For close protection. HE grenades.
close protection and assistance in making getaway.
Looking at the map I have here, this track is mirrored by the fence. There's no other fence outside that that's indicated.
Just one fence. Yep.
There's just that one fence. Well, that is so close. You don't need to be within that fence to put that entire track well within range. I mean, so close you couldn't miss.
Disguise should be the Gebirgsjäger uniform, since all security personnel wear this.
So effectively, what we're saying is there's no advantage, as far as the shoot is concerned, in being dressed as a German mountain soldier. The only advantage is that he might be able to get to the place more easily.
Yeah. And he might be able to get out.
And he might be able to get out.
He would certainly go for the disguise.
You go for a disguise.
Definitely, and a Mauser rifle. From the moment you land to the moment where you actually have him in your crosshairs, like a million different contingencies can arise.
Sure.
Where it might be necessary and possible to talk your way out of a situation, provided you do know a bit of German.
The question then has to be asked, is the requirement that they're a good shot, or is it that the requirement is that they are familiar with the area and they can pass themselves off through the checkpoints and so on and so forth?
If it's a discrete entry, then it's clearly got to be somebody who's got fieldcraft skills to the highest order, which is that you would expect of a military sniper. If, however, you're going to try to bluff your way in, then there is no soldier I know who would be able to do that.
I still think it also does lead one to this option of a two-man team. You have one sniper, and you have the SOE guy who actually provides the get-you-in service.
Would you consider an operation in Germany?
Of course I would. My German is limited.
We will combine your skills with an SOE agent who's fluent in German.
So we would go together?
The agent would facilitate getting you into the vicinity of the target so you could take the shot.
Do you have someone in mind?
A Polish POW.
I meant the target.
The target is in Bavaria, close to what was Austria, specifically an area called the Berghof.
The Berghof? Hitler's residence?
There is clearly a certain risk attendant on an operation with such a high-profile target. My first reaction was to the enormity of what this project would entail. It seemed impossible. But we have chosen the Berghof specifically because security is lax. The most decisive piece of information came from a bodyguard who said that our target takes a routine morning walk from here to a teahouse here, in open ground, bordered by dense forest and without guard. Hitler is reported as telling his guards to leave him alone whilst he's walking.
What are these?
There's sentry posts here and here, but they're out of sight of the path along this turn of the path here.
And this?
A perimeter fence, but it's not electric and it's not alarmed and there's no tripwire. It's 100 to 200 yards from the path.
Are there dogs?
There is a dog patrol that clears the area before he walks, so it would be necessary.
How do we get in?
Well, it's possible to walk along this road here in disguise and then cut across the woods along the river here. Are you married?
No.
Girlfriend?
What's the situation for exfiltration?
Well, it's not France, so we would be unable to send a small plane.
I suppose it would be possible to revert to the cover of a German trooper.
Yes. I would hope so.
I think some of them knew quite well they were going on what was their last journey. And yet this was what they were training for. and this was the sort of motivation they were working towards, and this job had to be done. And I'm given this job, I'm trusted to do it. If I don't come back, then that's it. I have to go.
The time had come to submit Operation Foxley. My job was done for the time being. The decision to go operational or shelve the plan would be made without me. But intelligence reports kept coming in. Maybe Rachel did finally believe that this wasn't just about me.
Hello? Miss Kaka. Fine. And you? When?
I have an uncle.
A junior German officer called Dieser had been captured. Maybe he could give us the last piece of the jigsaw. How to get our agents in. He said he was totally anti-Nazi and had a like-minded uncle called
Heidentaler, who's so anti-Nazi, always has been. He's got many friends in the neighborhood.
The Berghof.
Salzburg. Only 20 kilometers away. Mostly shopkeepers. They are all like him. Vehemently anti-Nazi. He also owns a shooting estate 16 kilometers northeast of Salzburg, where he often goes with friends at weekends. But never his wife. She is a Nazi. He can be approached there.
Would he be willing to shelter friends of ours?
Definitely.
And receive parachutists onto his land?
Why not? He knows everyone around, and the estate is huge.
There was a shift in my luck. Thornley was gone and a new man had been put in charge. Templar, a respected soldier and a supporter of assassination.
And I acknowledge there is a great divergence of views both in the desirability and the feasibility of Foxley. There is a general feeling that it is unsound, but there is also, among certain members of SOE Council, several strong advocates. And amongst the highest in the land.
Several strong advocates, amongst the highest in the land.
Thanks for these, I owe you one.
Oh, don't mention it. I was just...
Have you read Templar's report?
I did.
Does that mean Churchill's given us a go-ahead?
Maybe.
Blimey.
So this could really happen.
I just heard Major Prentice's view on all this, and bear in mind he really does have Templar's ear. The wireless indicate that what is currently happening in the war will dispose of Hitler. But as a result, he is suggesting that urgent attention should be given to Foxley.
Bloody hell, it's going to happen.
We'll see.
What I'm going to do is go round the table asking you if you think the plan would have worked. Would you approve it? And if not, why not? John?
The key things for myself would be to make it a success, you would need some sort of trigger mechanism to inform whoever was taking the task forward that Adolf Hitler was at the residence. given a priority 1 as an operation, if you had the full backing of SIS, SOE, the RAF and all the other bits and pieces, could it be successful? I think it's got a very good chance of being successful.
I think that there is a problem with the trigger, with knowing that Hitler's going to be there, and there's also a problem with the intelligence farm. But yes, I think it's perfectly feasible if extra work is done on the plan.
David?
If it were decided to go ahead with it, then the assets that are needed to fill in some of the gaps we've noted, I think, would be provided. I think it's got a good chance of succeeding, and I'd go with it.
Mark?
I've still got big problems with it. That said, with a team like this, when you get in your time machine and you take it back, it's a different matter.
Feasible? Very probably not. Where would it fail? Probably at some point during the approach phase. Would I still approve it? Probably yes. I mean, this is essentially a war where thousands are being butchered every day. So why not chance it in an operation where the potential dividends to be reaped are absolutely huge? So yes, and chances of success next to 0, but yes, I would still authorize it.
I think when I first looked at this plan, I thought it had about a sort of 1,000,000 to 1 chance of working. And as we teased out the problems and came up with solutions, and with the caveat that we've got the support of the Prime Minister behind this, so that everyone's singing from the same hymn sheet, that we've got the support of the RAF, we've got the support of SIS, and so on, I think that the chances have become something like 10 to 1, that it's probably going to fail, but that it's worth taking a risk.
Like Duncan, when I first looked at the plan, I thought, this is crazy, it ain't going to work. But because I think we've teased out some of the bits that weren't there, or papered over some of the cracks that are there, I think we've made it more feasible. And I personally would go ahead, though I recognise that the risk is absolutely enormous. So I would go for it.
They would parachute to the safe house supplied by POW Dieser's uncle. They would enlist the local shopkeeper who would smuggle them as far as the civilian guards, the Berghof's outermost circle of protection.
Ja, grüß dich, vergiss.
They would proceed disguised as mounted troops, with a cover story about being posted to a unit in the area, wary of SS patrols.
Papiere?
Unteroffizier Bayer zur 1. Gebirgsdivision bei Berchtesgaden abkommandiert. Unteroffizier Frank ebenso.
Hier steht, Sie waren in Norwegen, Unteroffizier Frank.
Jawohl.
Sie sind zu den Gebirgsjägern abkommandiert. Wir nehmen Sie mit.
Nein, vielen Dank, es geht schon.
Ich bestehe darauf.
Wir haben keine Papiere für das Führergebiet. Wir müssen bei der 1. Gebirgsdivision antreten, bevor wir in die Berge ziehen. Wir sind schon fast da, also vielen Dank.
In Ordnung.
Herr Hitler.
Heil Hitler.
Before reaching the next sentry post, they would leave the road, bury their uniforms, and head into the woods.
Zwei Unteroffiziere, die hier herumstecken. Für 15 Minuten müssen sie hier sein.
Ja? Ja? Nein! Sie haben im Moment nicht ankommen.
The agent should now be aware that his role is over, and the protection of the sniper is his only priority.
I think we are deserters. I go back, I draw them in the opposite direction. It's the only choice.
shoots snipers. Don't miss.
The sniper will be 100 to 200 yards from the path, well within striking distance of Hitler. Operation Foxley never happened. No assassins were ever sent to the Berghof.
Hello.
Hello.
We've come to get the files.
But they could have been. And I wasn't alone in thinking that the operation might have been successful. It is a fact that Foxley gathered accurate intelligence from reliable sources. One of Hitler's personal guard detail was an informant. There was a POW called Dieser who offered a way into the Berghof. There were Polish prisoners of war whom we trained as agents. A British army officer was asked if he would assassinate Hitler. A blueprint for an assassination was submitted in November '44, and SIS and SOE did have different agendas. Some thought the war would end if Hitler was dead, others that it was better for us if he was alive. Some said Nazism would end with Hitler's death. Others argued that Nazism would continue with another leader. Some were scared that he would become a martyr. Others had no doubt that he deserved to die. But nobody won the arguments. They just couldn't agree. And so we lost a narrow window of opportunity. Hitler left the Berghof in late summer of 1944, never to return. Operation Foxley remained a blueprint and was overtaken by the events of the war. In the end, Hitler cheated both the assassin and the victorious armies. Killed by his own hand on April 30th, 1945.
Would anyone like to offer any opinions of what would have been different if the operation had been implemented in, say, August of 1944 and had been totally successful? What would have been different in the way that the Second World War in Europe ended?
I think you can safely assume that the war would have come to an end before the end of the year. It certainly would have taken a few months or more, but I don't see it dragging on much beyond 1944, which of course means that, yes, some of the most notorious bombings, such as Dresden, Pforzheim and the like, would have been avoided. The concentration camps would have shut down, probably straight away. Even Himmler did this of his own volition when he got half the chance to do so in April 1945. So just the death of Hitler by itself would have sufficed for that.
Right.
I just ask how many lives, therefore, would not have been lost?
Well, let's start with the Jews. We're going to talk about 1 million to 1.25 million Jews not being killed. We're talking about the Jews of Hungary surviving, for a start, if the camps cease operation in August of 1944. We're talking about the Soviets who are going to die, who will not die. You know, the casualties for the Battle of Berlin. My guess is we're a rough ballpark figure, 10 million.
In 1946, SOE was decommissioned and Operation Foxley was filed away. I was just one of the backroom boys, but I had done my job. I had come up with the British plan to kill Hitler.
$400,000 stranded soldiers and the chances of getting them home next to none. The intimate stories behind the biggest rescue mission of the Second World War coming